another author interview at Crystal Lake, and today our guest is John Ward, and we will be talking about his book, A Blackened Heart, A Blackened Soul. So I'm going to let him introduce himself, so take it away.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Anita hit it right there on the head. John Ward, I'm the author of the new release, Blackened Heart, A Blackened Soul, which is a grief horror and possession horror story straight from hell. It is inspired by real life events that I went through, loosely, anyways. But very emotional ride, and I think people are really going to resonate with the story and the characters, and I'm really excited for people to read it. So.
Okay, so give everybody a quick overview of the book. What is it about?
Yeah, so more or less, I mean, the log line, if you will, is more or less that evil is watching, lurking, waiting in the shadows to pounce on you at your worst moment. So when my main character, Johnny Tinsley, is 8 years old, they're on the way back from a baseball game, and um, a car, because there's a heavy storm coming, the car coming the opposite direction swerves into their lane, and they wind up getting in a severe car accident. The mom perishes in that car accident, and his dad becomes wheelchair bound, paraplegic from the waist down. So hardship automatically hits little Johnny pretty hard. His grandma starts taking him to see a counselor at he's basically a priest, but he does counseling as well. And when he starts doing those counseling sessions, Father Rosario, who's the priest, starts to uncover some unsettling details that little Johnny is still seeing his mother, ghosts of his mother, or what he perceives to be that. And little Johnny is very hesitant to kind of unravel what he's actually been experiencing and going through, because the spirit of his mother, in quotations, has been manipulating him and telling him things, what not to do, what not to say, etc., and just kind of really manipulating how he should respond. Anyways, long story short, evil has infiltrated Johnny's life, and it is threatening to take everything and everyone that he ever loves. That's part one of the story. And then part two is 25 years later, with him in his early 30s as an adult. He's married, he's got a dog, all this good stuff. Him and his wife have become successful paranormal investigators. They released a documentary that went massively popular, and essentially they became quote unquote paranormal celebrities where they could do that full time. And they were getting ready to schedule their second paranormal documentary. Well, they did schedule it, and they went to go do it. And more or less, when they go to that location, something that was tied to that spirit winds up being in that building and brings that evil right back into Johnny's life. And things just spiral very, very quickly for John as an adult. A lot of very heavy material within that he's going to go through. And like I said, a lot of it's based on real life things that I went through, both in the paranormal and in personal life. So it's a very emotional and frightening story for sure.
So you did touch a little bit on the inspirations of your personal. If you want to talk about that, go ahead. But were there any other inspirations as well?
Uh, I mean, yeah. So I based it in the hometown I grew up in, which is Norton, Ohio. I loosely based things off my parents. Both are still alive, so that part was obviously fictitious. But like there's one personal thing. I don't want to give up too much, but a song that my mom, when I was a baby and I was having trouble sleeping, she would carry me in her arms and dance with me to that song until I would fall back asleep. I used that song in the book. For a couple different reasons that people will find out. My paranormal, a lot of investigations that I've went on, I took pieces from that, or nightmares that I had leading up to them or after them. I exposed and brought those into the book. And then some very personal things that I went through with my ex-wife that I won't touch on, but definitely went through an experience that I also incorporated. And it's just a massive, massive downward spiral. Obviously, part one is called A Blackened Heart, and then part two of the story is A Blackened Soul. So, obviously, the heartbreak as a kid, that's the Blackened Heart. And then as he's older and loses all will to fight, more or less, that's where the Blackened Soul comes in. So, but he's going to do his best to fight back.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about the main character. I mean, what is he like and what kind of a journey does he go on?
Yeah, great question. So he's kind of a lot of myself was incorporated in Johnny, for sure. So I tried to make him similar to my personality type, which is I like to joke around. He cracked jokes on Father Rosario and stuff about baseball. I was a big baseball player when I was little. Played a lot of little league baseball, so I incorporated stuff like that. So he's into sports. He's funny. He's brave, obviously. But you know, also as a kid, very naive. I feel like I would have been just as naive in that situation as an 8-year old, had I gone through those situations. So I really tried to think back to how I was at 8 years old and how I would have reacted, and I tried to input that into John Tinsley. And then there's a lot of, like I said, real life stuff on the adult piece. Even something as small as my main character, he was originally working in manufacturing before getting into the paranormal field. I did manufacturing for a long time, so there's a lot. But he's a hard worker, resilient character that you just can't help but root for.
Oh, well, it sounds interesting. And I'm pretty sure if I was a kid and I'd run into a ghost or paranormal thing, I'd run screaming.
Yep. And he does. He does.
Definitely.
Johnny Tinsley absolutely does as an 8-year old. He's afraid, and I don't blame him because the things in the story are absolutely terrifying. So
Okay, so as you said, the book delves into the supernatural evil and the idea of being stalked by supernatural evil. So, what was it about that kind of fundamental horror staple that intrigued you?
Uh, so this, I'm going to try to answer this as best I can, Anita, because, excuse me, part of it is what I went through as an adult. Some of the things that I went through when I brought in this trio of dolls into my house that were legitimately haunted with a very, very dark energy, potentially demonic, all that kind of stuff. Um, they really caused a lot of havoc and chaos in my life, and more or less when I started planning this story out, I took a lot of those real life situations and even manipulated them a little bit and would ask myself, like, if X had happened instead of Y, what would that result have been? And I used that formula quite a bit to help stage and get the story set up to where I needed that final point to go. Um, and for the emotional part for me is I think had a couple things gone wrong, the ending of this book potentially could have happened. But I'm thankful it didn't.
Interesting. Yeah, I know. I've had a couple of nothing major, but a couple objects that were definitely creepy and I was glad to get rid of when they left the house. So yeah,
For sure.
so I understand that. So, are there any secondary characters that kind of stood out for you or became a favorite?
Yeah, honestly. So one of the cool things, and I'm not saying it's original by any means, but I love to write in first person. And one of the things I did in a Blackened Heart, a Blackened Soul is it's multi-person, first-person point of view. So I got to introduce people to a lot of different characters. Johnny's grandma in part one, her name is Edna Tomko. And Edna is actually named after my great grandmother. So real life inspiration there. It's all over. It's everywhere in the book. Then there's also Father Rosario, who I've had a lot of people tell me he's one of their favorite characters in the book. He's in both parts. And then I also in part two introduced John's wife, whose name is Megan. All in all, I think they're all flawed characters that you can kind of relate to, but also strong enough that you want to root for them through all the hardship and difficulties. And then outside of that, there's like third level characters that are based on real life friends. There's a character named Eddie who's part of their paranormal team. I have a real life friend named Eddie who is part of my paranormal adventures, and another character named Sean that comes and tries to help cleanse the house. And that was a real life thing that happened. I had my friend Sean come out and cleanse my house when all that stuff was going on. So a lot of cool stuff.
That's cool. I bet your friends are going to want autographed copies now.
For sure.
So, what's your favorite scene in the book without spoilers?
Mm. So I'll keep it. I'm trying to think how to answer this. I'll say there's a scene in part one. It's in the kitchen, and it is my first attempt at actually trying to physically gross out readers. It's not extreme horror or anything like that. But I wanted to get that guttural reaction from people. And with my ARC readers, I had so many people compliment me on that scene. They did not see it coming because people have become so accustomed to my writing with Scareville that they were blindsided by it because it's not super late into part one. It's probably like maybe halfway, 2/3 into it when that happens. But yeah, that scene I think was really fun for me to kind of play around with that, and just having people eating out of my palm, if you will, kind of just I liked being able to write that. I'll just say the kitchen scene in part one for sure.
Yeah, some of those more gruesome and gross scenes can be fun to write. I get that, definitely. So, did you find anything challenging about writing your book? Was there a scene or a character that gave you any trouble?
Uh, I yes and no. I think the hard part for me was incorporating so many real life pieces, particularly the mental health stuff that I went to, because as much as this is a grief horror and a possession horror story, it is a love letter to mental health people that have struggled with it, which I think a lot of people will relate to. But a lot of the things that I struggled with and dealt with, having to resurface those feelings and picture those as I'm typing them out was a lot to deal with. There were several times I got very emotional, especially in part two, while writing it, which is again new for me as a writer to experience emotions while writing. But other than fright, right? But um, yeah, I would say just pulling from real life inspiration and having those emotional pieces out there. It's a very vulnerable feeling, and I think that was probably the most difficult part for me with this
Mhm,
book.
yeah. Yeah, understandable, definitely. So, as you mentioned, you were rather well known for writing middle grade horror. So, what was the difference in the mindset between writing horror for kids and writing horror for adults?
Great question. Honestly, there's not as much of a difference as people would think. Obviously, I change up the vocabulary a little bit. I can use swear words, but also bigger words and more descriptions and things like that. But I will say one of the nice things about doing Scareville and middle grade horror before I started writing adult horror is I taught myself how to write scares and scary scenes without relying on blood, guts, and gore. So I think that really helped me with being able to build tension, especially when the leash is off, to be able to write any kind of scene that I want to help build that tension and dread. Um, so I think that was a fun area to play in. In terms of the transition, I think for me, the hardest part was just making sure the plot was tighter. Because with Scareville, the books are 35,000 words. Like you can really get a lot done in that time frame. And this book was about 100,000 words. So I had to, throughout that journey, make sure there was no plot holes or inconsistencies and everything flowed. And that was probably the biggest challenge for me because it's basically three Scarable books in one, making sure everything's flowing and cohesive and the pacing is good. So that part was the hardest for me, struggling wise, was just the length and making sure it all fit.
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely a difference pacing between a shorter work and a longer novel, definitely, because
Yeah.
I write a lot of short stories and not novellas, and you always have to pay attention when you're doing a novel like that. You definitely can understand that too. So, do you have any more plans to write for an adult audience, or was this a one-time thing?
Oh no, yeah, I'm planning on doing more adult horror as well. So I'm going to be cycling between Scareville and my adult stuff. Now, I've got myself a little bit of a head start because I actually finished books 9 and 10 for Scareville. So they're locked and loaded, ready to be edited with Crystal Lake. So I've got most of this year to really start focusing on my next adult horror novel. And I've had 3 or 4 different ideas kind of battling for the forefront in my mind, but I think my second adult horror novel is probably going to wind up being a serial killer, psychological thriller horror novel, which will be very interesting to do. So
Yeah, serial killers are fun to write. Just a heads up. I've done a few of them in shorter stuff, so yeah.
I'm excited for it for sure.
Yeah, I've actually added a serial killer to my historical fantasy.
Love it. That's awesome.
That was not planned either. So it just kind of like popped up. Oh yes, yes. Your original plot went out the window. There's a serial killer now. So yeah.
Hey, that works though. Sometimes that's, you know what, there's so many times where I've laid out stories and plotted them out and stuff, and then I go completely sideways away from anything that I jotted down with my original idea. And usually that other idea that I just completely went, towards instead of the original idea was way better. So
Mm.
it usually works out.
Yeah. So what was the hardest challenge you've ever had to overcome in your writing life?
Mm, I would say, I mean, there's a few. I would say the first one is just building up the courage to follow through with it. I think there's a lot of people that want to write, but they're afraid. They're afraid of putting themselves out there and being criticized harshly, which is fair. I mean, you can absolutely run into that. But if you surround yourself with good editors and good people and get feedback from not just friends and family, but other people that read books that are in their genre that they like to read, and they can give you feedback, that'll go a long ways. But yeah, that's probably the biggest one. And then just being able to get yourself out there is a big time grind, and some people are afraid to do that, especially as introverts. I'm introverted. People may not feel that way when they see me at events and stuff, but I am absolutely an introvert at heart. So it takes a lot for me to be outgoing and talk to people and put myself out there on social media. But the more you do it, you're going to become more comfortable with it, and you got to be able to do it if you want. Like, if your goal is to have people read your books, you have to do it. So I would say those are the top two.
Oh yeah, definitely. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. Because I mean, when I first started doing video, even just as a guest, I was terrified. So
Yeah, yeah,
but look at me now,
100%.
I'm hosting stuff. So yeah. So what are some of your other interests besides writing? Do you have any hobbies?
Yeah. So, like I had kind of mentioned before, I do a lot of paranormal investigating. People can kind of see some Ouija boards up behind me. Uh, I love doing paranormal investigations. You get to go to all these historical haunted buildings, and you get to see them after hours in the dark, and it's such a vibe, especially if you like horror. Just even going in for historical tours during the day is remarkable. It's a lot of fun. Outside of that, pretty interested in food and sports. And photography. I like taking photography and traveling. So those, I'd say, are the big ones.
That's cool. I love photography. I don't do it myself, but I do like looking at other more
Oh,
talented photographers.
I can't even claim myself to be a talented photographer. I can get the angles and the foregrounds and backgrounds and all that kind of stuff, but as far as adjusting shutter speeds and all that kind of stuff, I that's a foreign language to me. But I do enjoy it.
Yeah, it is fun to go and snap the pictures. Anyway, it also keeps you from being getting your own picture snapped. I've found I stayed out of all the family photos because I was the official family photographer.
See, that wouldn't work for me because I would drag you into the picture. I'd be like, nope, you got to come over here, Anita. We got to get you in the picture. And then you'd be like, no, nope, nope.
Okay, so with the start of this new year, is there any book on your must-read list for 2026?
There's so many. My TBR pile is kind of out of control. My first read's going to be Becoming the Boogeyman by Richard Chismar, which I'm hoping will help me get my mind in the serial killer space. But the must read one that I know is coming out is going to be from Marcus Cleaver, and that's called The Caretaker. Marcus had my top read from last year, which was We Used to Live Here. So I am very, very excited for his new novel, The Caretaker. I'll be interested to see what he does. I've heard a lot of good things already from ARC reviewers on it. But yeah, that comes out in, I think, April. So I'm really looking forward to that one.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about some of the other books you've written.
About written or read? I'm sorry.
Written.
Written. Okay. Yeah. So, I've written the Scareville book series, which is a middle grade horror series in the same vein as Goosebumps. Up to this point, we've got 8 books in the series, ranging everything from supernatural to paranormal ghost stories to creature features to just anything in between, culty stuff even. But a lot of really fun, spooky reads. They've got their scary moments. I would say they're like Goosebumps, but more plot driven and a little bit scarier, if I had to compare. I do have books 9 and 10, like I had mentioned, already written, just waiting to be edited. So book 9 is going to be called Stay Out of Fort Dread. It's basically like a little zombie type story that I concocted based on a location here in Ohio, but based it in Connecticut. And then book 10, which I don't want to give too much away because I do think it's a very unique idea that hasn't really been tapped yet within the horror genre. But it is called Please Play with Caution. And I'll just say it's a board game horror story. It's not Ouija boards or anything like that, but it is a board game horror story that was a lot of fun.
Mm. So, besides the two Scareville books, do you have any other projects coming out soon?
I mean, I know I've got a release with Crystal Lake's anthology Hotel Macabre 2. I've got a short story in that. In terms of other projects, like I said, I'm going to start my next adult horror novel, which will probably be like a serial killer, psychological thriller horror. That'll be up next. And then I'm going to try to write between 2 and 4 more short stories this year as well. Probably 1 or 2 will go in anthologies, but I'm trying to build up enough stories in that now to where I can eventually release a short story collection, maybe the second half of next year. So, yeah, just trying to get out ahead of the game so I can continue to have a good pace going.
Lots to look forward to. And Hotel Macabre 2 comes out at the end of January. So if
Yes,
anyone's interested in that anthology, it looks wonderful. So yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, so I think we'll wrap the interview up here. Thank you for being a guest. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
Always a pleasure to chat with you too, Anita. I always love chatting books. So thank you for having me on.
Okay, and that's it for this episode. And bye for now, everybody.